Computer security is an issue of global concern, and in current scenario when there are so many cyber attacks, cyber crimes, how do I protect myself? The first and foremost comes in my mind is using an antivirus or a firewall, right? I'm sure everyone has the same answers. But in this case, I would like to tell you one thing, that what is your first entry point? And yes, our first entry point is operating system. So operating system is an interface between user and the hardware. And speaking of operating systems, primarily most of the users are well versed with Windows operating system because that is easy to use and easy to learn, and it is also available. The point here is when we buy a new laptop or a hard disk or a computer, we go ahead and install an operating system. The easiest one is either the operating system comes bundled or we go ahead and download a pirated one. So just imagine buying a new laptop and using a pirated operating system. Is it secure? Is it safe? I'm sure this will be a point for you to think of, because if you are using a pirated operating system, then why you are concerned about security? And coming about security, what comes in our mind is Linux operating system. So hi friends, this is Vishal Dave and I'm going to take you through the module on Linux. And in this module we will see the benefits of Linux, what are the different features, what is the history of Linux, and how we can go ahead and use Linux. So we will try to learn more and more about this in this module. So are you all ready? Let's start. So primarily when speaking of operating system is an interface between the hardware and the user. So you input some command and automatically that goes ahead and it starts working accordingly. So on the right side, you can see that on the lower bottom, it's hardware. And on top of that, it's operating system. So primarily speaking of a software can be classified into system software and application software. Under system software, we have operating system like Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and so on. And under application program, we have Tally, browsers, and so many things. So as you can see that first layer, it's hardware. On top of that, we have operating system. On top of that, we have applications, and then user communicates. Initial days, operating system used to come in two formats. One was CLI, command line interface, where user had to input everything, which means if you want to start a Word document, you have to type in the command and then you have to just type in the content, and then by using a command you have to save the document. But now what we can do is we can simply go to programs, open a Word and can type our content. So the one which we can open, it's termed as GUI, graphical user interface. So in command line interface, everything we do has to be done using in command. But in GUI, we can actually use, see and view everything. So primarily when it started was DOS. When we had a DOS used to have command line interface, and then Windows 95 and others came in, which was completely GUI, which means you can see, feel and do whatever you want by set of instruction. So this made life easier. So coming forward, Linux was also text based or a GUI mode, and the text was very easy, and geeks currently also loves the CLI because they know that it is very difficult, but once you start using it, they use it. So now initial days Linux was considered to be one for the geeks because it only used to support CLI. But with the current variations and flavors, now it is almost identical and easy to use like Windows. And the best part is it's available for free. I'm going to take that in the next set of things. As I say, we come up with Linux features, and the first and foremost feature is open source. So speaking of open source is one of the process where I get all the softwares for free, I get the codes for free, and I can use it as per my requirement. So I don't have to pay any licensing fee, unlike Windows where I have to pay a license fee to use it. So Linux all are open source, and I can use anything and whatever I want, and if required I can customize it as per my requirement. Going forward, security is of paramount importance, and Linux making it so effective that you are always safe. So I'll give you an example. In current scenario, when there is a ransomware attack, if you go ahead and check, most of the system which were infected by a ransomware had a Windows operating system. So what happens is, if a file gets infected, it starts infecting all other files on your computer. But in context of Linux, if there is any attack, it will not spread, which means viruses are not effective or malwares are not effective on Linux platform, which also ensure that this is very, very secure and one cannot spread. Going forward, lightweight, when I say, so considering how you go ahead, so if you want to deploy a Windows operating system, it takes around 50 GB to get the installation done with at least 2 or 4 GB RAM. But with Linux, the installer is very small and the space taken by itself is very, very less, and which is very lightweight on your computer. So if we have 2 GB RAM or a 1 GB RAM, we can use it freely. But just imagine using a Windows 10 on 1 GB machine, not possible. Going forward, and the next in line is multiple distributions. We have multiple flavors in Linux, starting with Red Hat Enterprise, we have Fedora, we have Ubuntu, and so on. I'm going to take a session on this module in the next module, where we will learn the multiple flavors of Linux. So now let's try and go ahead and learn about the history of Linux. And trust me, it is interesting, and I'll try to ensure that all thing is covered. So it all started in 1964 in Bell Laboratory at New Jersey. They started a project where they wanted to prepare an operating system which was multitasking, multi-user, and they started working on them. And eventually in 1969, they realized that it was very difficult for them to go ahead and continue. So during that period, Dennis Ritchie, I'm sure everyone knows who Dennis Ritchie is, right? So Dennis Ritchie was the one who developed C. And Ken Thompson decided that we would take this project forward and we will not get it wasted. So they started working on the platform which is now called as Unix operating system. So initial days Unix was not called as Unix, UNIX, but it was termed as UNICS, as we say, Uniplex Information and Computing Services, which is now called as Unix. So when they started working on this, they got started, and then eventually in 1975 they got an upgraded version of Unix. So as you can see that the development started in 1969, and probably in a span of 5 to 6 years they were able to get a flavor which was free to use, multi-user, and was working properly. Eventually most of the companies identified that as an opportunity. So now what they did was, since Unix was open source and the source code was available, the major companies plan out and started working on their commercial edition. So IBM came up with their own operating system, AIX. Sun Microsystem came up with their own operating system which was termed as Solaris, and HP came up with their own operating system which was termed as HP UX, and then also Mac OS, which followed the Unix. So primarily Unix gave birth to all these because it was source code was used, and the best part was the companies identified an opportunity and they created their own custom versions. And to add on it, they started making money by selling it. Yes, so a free version after customization was now being sold. With this, in 1991, Linus Torvald planned out that he wanted to work on a project and he wanted to use Linux. But when he went back and saw that major companies who were preparing Unix were commercial edition, then it would cost him a fortune to get it done for his project. So eventually he was not able to use it because he could not afford it. So he decided that I will come up with an operating system which will be easy to use and available for free, which I don't have to pay, and students who want to do some projects would not suffer just as I have suffered. So he planned out, and then he checked out one of the operating system called Minix. So Minix was an operating system which was created by Andrew Tannenbaum. So we know Andrew Tannenbaum by his contribution on networking, and there is the book also. So Andrew Tannenbaum prepared this operating system for kids so that they can learn. And Linus Torvald identified this and used it as a base for his operating system, which is now termed as Linux. So Linux came from Linus Torvald. So he is the one who invented Linux. And once he prepared it, trust me, it went viral. People started loving it and it got popular. So if got popular and popular so that everyone started using it. During the same time, in 1991 to 1995, there was a free software movement which was there, and where they went ahead and started giving some software for free. And here comes the birth of GNU, which is termed as GNU's not Unix. So here free softwares were available as per users freedom, users choice, and were available to users for free. So primarily speaking of a Linux, Linux itself is not an operating system as a whole, but it is a kernel. So kernel is one of the things which I'm going to cover in the next slide. But primarily Linux is a kernel, and when Linux is combined with GNU, a set of free software, it is termed as a complete OS. But as we all say that going forward, it went so popular that now people would not consider Linux plus GNU as a separate thing, and they consider it as a whole. And now Linux was known as Linux operating system. So here comes kernel is one of the main component of an operating system. So speaking of an operating system, whether it's a Windows, Unix, Mac, kernel is the most important part. Where what it does is it identifies the and it processes. So as you can see on the right side, while speaking of operating systems has multiple modules like bootloader, kernel. So you can see that kernel is a separate part of an operating system. Then we have device drivers, security, networking, user interface, and user application. So the kernel ensures that it has a complete control on the operating system and the hardware, and it can work accordingly. Take it an Android or any operating system, this is where a kernel is used. So primarily when we are using an Android, it is a modified version of kernel along with some free softwares. So in a nutshell, we can say that what started in 1964 was the base for Linux. And yes, most of the people say that Linux is a clone of Unix. But trust me, this is one of the best operating system. And now, in fact, corporates and major vendors have realized that they are using Linux as a server. So primarily, CentOS is being used, CentOS, Red Hat, and other operating systems are used for protecting their servers. So considering it as a mail server or a web server, people have started using Linux effectively and also saving on their licensing cost. So with this, we will now move ahead and learn about the various flavors of Linux in the second module. So I'm sure we all are ready, right? And you would be eager to learn more about the various flavors of Linux.